Go ahead and call ourselves to order. We do have quorum here, and ready to go. First up will be, I hope if I looked at the right piece of paper, approval of our agenda, which we can do by consensus. Is there any changes needed to our agenda? Okay, then that's approved as presented. That will be followed by approval of our March 7th meeting minutes. Take a motion from anyone who was present at that meeting.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. Second. Motion by Monica, second by Cecily. Are there any corrections needed to our minutes? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented, staff?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it's approved. Thank you. That brings us to the public invitation portion of our meeting for anyone to address the commission on things not on our agenda for the day. Is there anyone registered for that?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. Then we'll move on to business items. We have 3. First up will be for Cottage Grove Ravine Regional Park, a park acquisition opportunity fund grant. Go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Jessica Lee, I'm the Senior Planner here at the Council. And the first item tonight is Cottage Grove Ravine Regional Park Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund Award for the Stu-Mac property in Washington County.
Just in time.
Cottage Grove Ravine Regional Park is located in the southern part of Washington County near Cottage Grove. The park has diverse natural systems including heavily wooded ravines, prairies, wetlands, and ponds. It also contains Ravine Lake, a major attraction to the park. The map on the left shows the park boundary shaded in gray with current county ownership outlined in red. The 11-acre Stu-Mac property is located on the south end of the park, highlighted in green. The property, also shown in the photo on the right, is undeveloped and contains a mix of prairie, hardwoods, wetlands, and ponds. The Stu-Mac property appraised at $525,000 and the seller has agreed to that amount. So the total acquisition cost is $542,296. The grant amount would be $406,722 and Washington County will provide the 25% local match. Our rationale for recommendation is that this acquisition is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund, the Cottage Grove Ravine Regional Park Long Range Plan, and Washington County within its $1.7 million per fiscal year limit for the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund Park Acquisition Opportunity Funds. So with that, a recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $406,722 from the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund to Washington County to acquire approximately 11 acres located at 9826 East Point Douglas Road South in Cottage Grove, Minnesota for the Cottage Grove Ravine Regional Park, and to authorize the Executive Director of Community Development to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the Council. And thank you. With that, I'm happy to take questions.
All right. Any questions, commissioners? Yes, David.
Of that, so $500,000, or I guess $406,000, and then there's a match. What percentage is that for, and maybe you can't answer this, what percentage of that $406,000 is part of the annual budget? I guess that's what I was.
Yeah, and it's a little bit more complicated than that because we have money that comes in that doesn't have to be spent necessarily in that year, so we can carry balances over. So rather than an annual budget, can you tell us kind of the situation of the account?
Sure. So we have funding sources from Parks and Trails Legacy Fund and Environment Natural Resources Trust Fund, and they're both matched 3-2 with council funds. And so each year we receive Parks and Trails Legacy funds. And then occasionally we receive Environment Natural Resources Trust funds. We have to apply for those, so we don't always have them. Right now we do. And those funds typically expire after 3 years. The Parks and Trails Legacy funds don't typically expire, but we usually use them within a few years. And so right now we have a pot of money that contains funds from fiscal 22, fiscal 23, and fiscal 24. If that makes sense. And we're sitting at around 10 million.
Okay.
Yes.
If I'm not answering your question, David, please let me know. Each agency has a $1.7 million funding limit for each fund, so total $3.4 million, and this will come out of their Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund.
Legacy.
Or legacy, excuse me.
Okay. It sounds like I need to do a little homework on how that, all that gets navigated.
We, hold on to your questions. I am going to set up a meeting with you and Chris just to talk generally about the regional system and any questions that you have, so. I hope that was, I don't know if that was helpful.
I always have questions. Jessica, could you please go back to slide 2? Yeah. Yeah, I had to keep looking at that map. I think this is a great project, but just the red line is what the county owns right now. And the lavender or whatever color is what is in the master plan boundary. It's such an odd shape at the top. You know, I wonder,
Yeah. Can I ask Chair?
you know, why it doesn't fill out for, maybe that's ag land or something. I couldn't really tell.
I'll approach you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
Tell us who you are and your position for our record.
Okay, I'm Sharon Price and I'm with Washington County. And I'm the property acquisition manager for Washington County. So that odd-shaped stuff up towards the north came about back in, I want to say 2006 or 7, when we removed about 38 acres within our park boundary for our Washington County Service Center and then the city of Cottage Grove's City Hall and Hero Center. And somewhere in there, the reconfiguration to add that back in and create the new amended park boundary got the weird scenario, and then we were also following the ravine, so we were staying more away from the farmland as opposed to just cutting it off straight across. So we kind of follow a ravine going up to 80th Street as opposed to just cutting it straight across.
Okay, well now that's making sense, because the times I've been there, I've always gone to the wrong building.
Right,
Okay, good, thank you.
it's to the new service center thing, right? Yeah. Anything else? Or motions?
Sure. I move the proposed action, which Tony will read.
Okay. A motion for proposed action from staff report. Do we have a second for that?
I second.
Second from Monica. So that is that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $406,722 from the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund to Washington County to acquire approximately 11 acres located at 9826 East Point Douglas Road South in Cottage Grove for the Cottage Grove Ravine Regional Park, and authorize the Executive Director of Community Development to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the council. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, yeah, it looks like a pretty good one, especially since it's down by what is the entrance. Kind of gives us a nice buffer to it. So I guess, hearing nothing else, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that is approved. Thank you. We'll move on to another very similar thing for Blakeley Bluffs Park Reserve, also a Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund grant award for Scott County.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. For the record, this is business item 2024-90, Blakeley Bluffs Park Reserve Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund Award for Barbarawi property for Scott County. Blakeley Bluffs Park Reserve is a future park reserve located in the southwest corner of Scott County along the Minnesota River Bluffs. This planned park reserve features large areas of continuous forest, stunning view sheds, dramatic topographic changes, and high-quality habitat. The map on the right shows the park boundary, which is approximately 2,400 acres. The county expects the full acquisition of the park reserve to span several decades. The 41-acre subject property is shown on the map in blue and is adjacent to county-owned parklands shown in purple. The property shown in the image on the left contains about 25 acres of cultivated land that will eventually be restored to prairie and woodlands, and 15 acres of maple, basswood, and oak forest, both of which are Minnesota native plant communities. Within the forested area is a protected stream, Big Possum Creek, that connects to the Minnesota River. The property also contains a home that will be evaluated for moving or deconstruction. The property appraised at $760,000. The landowner agreed to a purchase price of $843,600, which is 111% of the appraised value. The PAOF program allows up to 110% of the appraised value, or $836,000. So the total eligible project cost is $907,315. The grant amount would be $680,486, and Scott County will provide a 25% local match. Our rationale for recommendation is that this acquisition is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund, the Blakeley Bluffs Park Reserve Acquisition Long Range Plan, and Scott County is within its $1.7 million per fiscal year limit for the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund. Our recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $680,486 from the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund to Scott County to acquire approximately 41 acres located at 24236 Union Trail in Belle Plaine, Minnesota for Blakeley Bluffs Park Reserve, and authorize the Executive Director of Community Development to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the council. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Questions, commissioners?
Question here.
Yes, Bob.
I'm a little confused, Jessica, on the 110%, 111% thing. So are we approving, I'm assuming we cannot go beyond 110%, is that correct?
Correct.
And so Scott County is needing the additional piece, or how does that go?
Yes, correct. So that extra 1% will be above their 25% match.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether that number is reflected. There's a part that refers to how much they're going to have to ask from their county board. Like, is that the part that they have to ask of the part that we consider? Or is that the part that they actually have to ask for? It probably doesn't matter, but yeah. It's kind of weird. But the idea is they end up just making up that shortfall. Anything else?
Only to say that this Blakeley Bluff area is really quite stunning. It's a major bluff rise off of the Minnesota River. It frequently floods out in the high river periods, but the land therefore becomes not very productive as far as ongoing livability, but it's marvelous as far as a park reserve. So just a stunning piece of property.
Yeah, I really like this kind of, not projects, but well, there are projects, I guess, like when you can restore the native plants and restore all the nature. Those are great ones. For the record, I don't like this seller. He should go cheaper, just so you know. But I can make a motion if you want,
Okay, that would be great.
but you read it.
Okay, we have a motion from Monica for the item from the staff report. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Bob. For a motion that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $680,486 from the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund to Scott County to acquire approximately 41 acres located at 24236 Union Trail in Belle Plaine for the Blakeley Bluffs Park Reserve, and authorize the Executive Director of Community Development to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the council. Discussion. Yes, David.
Just, I'm noticing that map on, I guess, page 2 that has the green outline. Is that, what time frame is in trying to fill in everything within that boundary? What do we look at normally for that kind of thing?
So it varies a bit, but most of our park agencies are doing things on a willing seller basis in addition to the availability of funds. So it kind of depends on when any of these landowners feel like selling because they've either moved on or want to downsize or off in estates after someone passes away. So It's usually somewhere on the time frame of decades to completely do it. But we do have some where something can happen suddenly that makes a big difference. Like, we don't have all the parcels marked on here, but it's possible that there could be one landowner that has a large portion of it. That's what's happening in Washington County right now. At Big Marine, there's a huge swath that has been unacquired, but almost all of it is the same landowner, and they have just now started into the process of selling. So I'm guessing that this one is not that kind of a case. It's probably parcels of, anywhere from 40 to 160 acres for a lot of them. So it'll probably be a long time, but you also see some focus of being able to use the park before you have all of it. So like there's a chunk that's all together that this is part of, and then another chunk down along the river. So you can still have those open to the public as park, even while we're waiting on the other in-holdings.
And just, this isn't anything that I'm gonna expect an answer on now, but in deciding how, the basic shape of what an outlined area is, I'm assuming there's a number of factors in there, and if there's, somewhere, maybe I could talk to you on that afterwards on how I can educate myself on how that process is even had, because it just seems like these are all pretty unique shapes, and I don't know how much of that is environmental versus practical or other.
Yeah, some of it's definitely environmental, looking at what we refer to as the high quality natural resource potential, whether that's existing or things that can be restored. Some of it is knowing what's possible for willing sellers later. Often the implementing agencies have had some conversations and they know, like, okay, so this person's actually planning to sell to us in 20 years, and this person adamantly refuses. So maybe you draw that line based on that sometimes. Some of them also depend on what the local municipalities are guiding in terms of zoning, because that comes in. But yeah, that's all part of what's the long-range plan process. Yes, sir.
We have Alyssa Olson here who knows more than I do, but I was just gonna mention that I think that there's a wildlife management area next to part of this, so that area is already protected.
Also that.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Good, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes as well, thank you. And we'll go on to our third one, and it's just, this is the Regional Parks and Trails Competitive Equity Grant Program funding recommendations. This is a little bit different from everything else. I'll let Jessica explain why.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. This is business item 2024-91, 2024 Regional Parks and Trails System Competitive Equity Grant Program funding recommendations. So first, for some background, the Equity Grant Program's purpose is to provide funding to regional park implementing agencies for projects to advance equitable use of the regional parks and trail system, with a focus on race, ethnicity, income, age, ability, and/or national origin. This program came to be in 2019 with a pilot program. At the time, we only had $300,000 available in funding, and that was for capital projects only. All the agencies applied, and we were able to fund 3 of 15 applications. And this demonstrated a great need for this program, and so in 2021, the council dedicated our parks interest earnings along with some capital funds so we could fund a mix of capital and non-capital projects. And we had about $2 million, and we funded 23 of 37 applications. So it's still pretty competitive, but we were able to do a lot of programming with that money. So that brings us to 2024. This last cycle that just closed a couple months ago, we had 8 of the 10 agencies apply. We submitted 22 applications requesting a total of $2,165,500. And just for reference, we have $2,068,658 available. And so just slightly over what we had available. So the review committee comprised of members from MPOS, the Community Development Committee, and implementing agency staff received applications and scored them and reviewed them on their own, and then we got together on March 1st as a group to talk about those rankings and develop funding recommendations. And the committee decided that all 22 projects should be funded. 2 of them were reduced slightly for eligible components, which worked out perfectly with what funding we had available. And so we're recommending a total of $2,055,500 be recommended for funding. I'm not going to read all these to you. They are in the packet along with project summaries if you want more information. But I will just highlight the top 3 that scored in the 90s. The City of St. Paul, Water Safety and Drowning Prevention Program, Anoka County's Mobilizing Inclusivity for Adaptive Equipment Solutions, and Three Rivers Park District Water Safety Education. And you'll see that all the projects scored higher than 78 and above. So we're very pleased with the projects this go around. I just want to highlight some takeaways from the review committee. This is just an observation more than fact, but it appears that the agencies really refined their projects this time around and applied for the max they could get in funding instead of above that. And so they really chose which projects they wanted to work on this time. So that resulted in less applications, but they seemed more prioritized. Like I mentioned, we decided all the projects have merit and are worth funding, and some of the lower scores might reflect the application more than the project itself. There's a lot of support for water safety and drowning prevention projects. Many people were glad to see that 3 different agencies applied for those projects. We would like to see more engagement with schools. Schools can make excellent partners with most of these projects, and we want to encourage the agencies to do so. More than half of the projects are for programming efforts across an entire agency district rather than focused on one park or trail. There's a lot of discussion around whether or not we want this program to fund existing programs to continue the programmings like phase 2, phase 3, or to support expanding existing programs. So there's just a recommendation to put language in the notice of funding availability next time to clarify whether we want to support that or not. And generally speaking, we are supporting that this time around. There's a couple that are expanding or continuing programs. There's also a suggestion to find a way to incentivize agencies to work together so it doesn't take away from the individual projects. So for example, if an agency is limited to $400,000, if they wanted to work with another agency, maybe have a way for that to not count towards their total. And then finally, there's a suggestion that we have a presentation to the committee of whole after the current grant rounds close. And there's currently still many grants open, and a lot of them have been extended, so we don't know when this will happen. Maybe at the end of summer, but it might not be until next year. But once we have the majority of the current grants closed, we'd like to come forward and talk about what we learned and what worked well and what didn't work as well, and share some of those results. So with that, our rationale for recommendation is that the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, Finance Chapter 8, Strategy 4, states that equity is a consideration in the regional park system funding and investment, and the equity grant program is one key council strategy for advancing equity in the region. So our recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council approve funding 22 projects totaling up to $2,055,500 for the Regional Parks and Trail System 2024 Equity Grant Program as shown in Table 1 of the report, and authorize the Executive Director of Community Development to execute the grant agreements and associated amendments on behalf of the Council. With that, I'm happy to take questions.
All right. Questions on that, anybody? Amanda?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm, so these were all of the projects that were submitted? Okay, so I just wanted to confirm that Dakota County was one of the 2 agencies that did not submit any applications.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Cecily?
I only have 3 questions. And I'll refer to them in your slides. Could you please go back to the takeaways? I love the idea of a presentation to the committee of the whole, but what about a presentation to us or a joint meeting of the 2?
Yes, that's a great idea.
Thank you. And then if you could go back to the list of all the projects, I was excited to see the Ramsey County one about art engagement across regional parks. And Tony, it may have been you at a meeting when we were talking about this program before it was launched, about whether we could, instead of equity, do arts or have another theme. And I don't know if these funds are tied to just equity, but, you know, and I don't know what the agencies think either, but
Sure.
whether the theme is fixed.
It's not. This is what I've referred to at a couple of meetings as something that's a to-do item for us. Currently, there's both the equity grant program itself and what we've been using as a significant funding source in the interest earnings. Both of those exist without a statement about them in our parks policy plan directly. If you look at the rationale for recommendation here, it just refers to a very general bit we had in our finance chapter. We should do equity things. So we need to write something that says something more exact, and during the course of that discussion, we could decide, you know, do we want to broaden it to other things or not? That's potentially within our power. One thing that I will tell for especially our new people, some of the background on that, those interest earnings used to be limited to one particular park by statute, or not statute, session law. And at the time that that had been done, it was a very underserved part of the system in an area with a higher proportion of people of color, lower incomes, that sort of thing. So it's something that they later then changed session law to open it up to us and give us discretion about it. And we had also been talking about equity a lot at the time, so it kind of made sense to say, let's use this for a broader equity purpose throughout the system. But if we want to do other kinds of things, we can potentially do that, subject to, you know, council approval also. Emmett?
Chair and Commissioners, I just wanted to mention, and I wanted to call Amanda Lovely up just for 2 seconds, but I think we could do both equity and art. Like, I think that isn't something that is mutually exclusive. In fact, I was just gonna ask Amanda to talk for 2 seconds about the art and policy project for the information of the commission. Sorry I put you on the spot.
No problem. Good evening. I'm Amanda Lovely, the Parks and Trails Ambassador. And yeah, Emmett was saying, I think like art and equity can go hand in hand, so I don't think it has to be one or the other. And I'm excited to see that Ramsey County is applying. And we are working right now on a really large project across the council with the Regional Development Guide, where we're bringing in 14 different artists to work on policy and art and engagement across the council as a whole. And the first 4 artists all said yes today. And we'll be wrapping buses and trains in the policy plan initiative, along with there'll be things happening in parks as well too. So the project is just starting to roll out. But yeah,
Thanks.
great questions, Cecily.
Anybody else?
I was on the committee for all these grants, and I thought it was very interesting, read them and learn from all the agencies, what they were working on, and what is their idea of what is equity and how they can work towards. I really like all the projects on it. Which are the ones that were partially funded?
Oh, sure. So there's, it's the Three Rivers Park District's Oakland Center Farm to School.
Yep.
We decided that the capital component wasn't eligible,
Makes sense.
but we're still funding the programming portion of that. And then Three Rivers in-park bike rental stations, we had to reduce by 10,000 because they had some costs that weren't capital costs, and they'd maxed out on their programming cap. And so we're just funding the capital component of that project.
All right, thank you.
So for the bike one, the eligibility question was because of things in the notice of funding availability for this particular grant program this year. For the other Three Rivers thing, that was because they had capital costs proposed that were not within a park. And we can do programming outside of parks, but we decided that capital outside of the park didn't quite work. And that's from our parks policy plan rather than just this. Anything else? Yes, Bob?
First of all, nice job, and I'm glad that all the projects that were proposed got funded. I think that's neat. Talking about the agency as a whole, this is not going to be surprising for people who've been here for a while, but I continue to believe that if we want to increase equity, we should create greater awareness of the park system. And I would love to see some effort made toward financing a greater awareness program of our system and some of the various parks or recreation opportunities or whatever. I just think we're missing a major impact by not making a greater awareness to new and existing citizens of our area. So I don't know how to affect that, but I will continue to say that it's important, and I think it would pay tremendous dividends.
Yeah, and I'm bummed that Sue isn't here today. I was just gonna say, it might be useful for her to talk to CDC members about that and bring something back to us of what is the sense of the council's desire for how to move on something like that. Because a lot of that would kind of come from their direction, depending on, you know, budgetary sorts of things. So it'd be interesting to maybe propose an information item at CDC sometime, to like, hey, MPOSC has been discussing this, do you have any thoughts? And just report back on whatever they might say.
Bob, in that note, when I was reading the programs, Washington County, the Anoka County, has a social media influencer awareness campaign as their project. And I was thinking, oh, this is exactly what Bob is talking about. So I'm very interested in see how that works.
Yeah,
Because
that's
it's one
great.
of the things that we don't have, and we talk a lot, and I like that one. And that's kind of why I like the Carver County wall, moving wall. It says, you have a moving climbing wall, and people are gonna go just to see it so they can use it as an awareness of the park. So I'm with you. We need to make people aware of what we're offering.
And Amanda is dying to tell us something.
I was gonna say the same thing, just that there's a social media one that and they're collaborating, so Washington and Anoka County, and they're focusing on bringing in BIPOC influencers to raise awareness of the system. And Janessa on our team is gonna work with them on the Met Council social media to kind of do a whole BIPOC focused raising awareness across the system.
That is good to call out that is one project that is multi-agency.
Yeah, and they worked together on the Learn to Ride in the last round, which was pretty awesome, where Anoka and Washington teamed up together on a Learn to Ride program around biking. So there is some collaborating, which is exciting.
Yes.
Tess?
I was gonna say, Bob, to your point, I was also on this group or part of this committee, and a lot of these projects were initiated by the communities that are using the parks. And so I felt a lot of hope when hearing that, because it means that that this and these establishments are listening to the communities that actually use the parks and use all of the facilities, and they're trying to create projects and programs that really sustain those communities that are using it for their families, and that will bleed out into them telling their friends and bringing in more community. So that made me feel really hopeful about this too, is that it was, a lot of people really spoke out and really wanted these projects to work, and we were just able to insist in giving them the funding that they needed to keep on doing some really cool work, so. Yeah.
Yes, Bob?
I don't know the answer to this, but I assume that Met Council has one or more advertising agencies that they use to promote light rail or ridership or things of that nature. Is that true? One or more?
We have a communications department that works with many consultants to do the work that they do.
Someplace along the way, I would love to have somebody from that department talk to us. Because I think this is a big deal, I really do. And I think that as we have more and more new people moving into our area who may not even speak English, we need to figure out a way to do the basics, which is to say, hey, we exist, here's where we are, here's how you get there, here's what it costs. And I would like to see a stronger presence of that kind of a strategy employed by our overall organization as a whole.
Mhm.
So,
So you're thinking of something that's centralized as opposed to the regional park system that program's emanating from?
I am saying in addition to, if the agency, the Three Rivers does a masterful job of a whole lot of stuff, but we have 10 different agencies, we have different type of parks all over the place, and we have new people who don't know that we even exist or that the parks are available free or at low cost to use. I think if we're looking to increase equity, then part of that is awareness. And I think that as a central organization or a coordination of 10 implementing agencies, we could put some money or strategy of social media against that.
Or even put some effort behind helping the different agency partners develop their own communication in some manner. Is that fair
Perhaps.
too?
Yeah, perhaps. If we had that kind of structure, yeah.
Chair, Bob, I'll pass that request on to the Director of Communications, because I think she'd be really happy to come down and talk to us.
Good.
So,
All right, thank you. Anything else?
Thank you. Yeah. And that'd be free for lunch.
If you're buying.
Yeah, probably.
Yes, Dave.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was just gonna make a motion.
Yes, please.
Make a motion to approve, or that the Metropolitan Council approve the $2,055,500 for the 2024 Equity Grant Program as shown in this document.
Okay, we have a second for that?
I'll second.
Second for Bob. All right, so the entire motion is that the Metropolitan Council approve funding 22 projects totaling up to $2,055,500 for the Regional Parks and Trails System 2024 Equity Grant Program as shown in Table 1 of this report, and authorize the Executive Director of Community Development to execute the grant agreements and associated amendments on behalf of the Council. Any discussion? We've already gotten into it, but further discussion.
I was just gonna comment that you raised, I think one of your top three was programs on water safety, and boy, I think that is just such a fantastic thing that multiple agencies are. I just cannot believe the number of not just children but grown adults that really don't know how to swim very well, and so I think it's a worthwhile program, and I think it unfortunately hits a lot of the non-Caucasian populations very hard. So
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
I just want to comment broadly that we've seen several years of this come through now, and I like that every year the projects get a little bit more mature in what we're trying to do. Because it's kind of the first time we said equity and we didn't have a lot of guidance on what that meant. And as we've gone through this year over year, both this commission and the people working at the park agencies are getting a better handle on what equity means and what we can do about it, and our grant proposals reflect that. So if you go compare what all these applicants are to our first 2 years, I think you'll see that we're making a significantly more effective difference with these, and I really appreciate that. And the takeaways for next year, we're doing the same thing. And one of the things that happens is we get these back and it challenges us to figure out things that we can do better in our next notice of funding availability too. Anything else? All right, hearing none, all in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes and is approved. All right. That brings us on to the information item of the day, which is for the 2050 Regional Parks Policy Plan update. We have some draft policies and actions. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Emmett Mullen, the Regional Parks Manager, and Kevin Pham and I are really pleased to share the status of the 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan. Changing the name, we're sticking trails in there because we call it the Regional Park System. We've done that for so long, and trails has become such a significant part of our system that we don't want to leave that out. So it's Regional Parks and Trails Policy. So today our main focus, as our chair just said, will be on the parks draft policies and actions. And they're really built on the solid foundation that we have in the 2040 plan. Like, we have a good plan, but we think we can make it even better. We think we can expand it and evolve it forward. Based on outreach, we've done extensive outreach with targeted communities. Our conversations with the 10 regional park implementing agencies have been really important. Our conversations principally with you. You are our advisors on this. We've heard a lot. And also meeting with our council members. We appreciate the ability to present this update to you, and I want to let you know that we'll be back next month, and let's just go with every month over the summer. Next month we'll have our what we're calling the 60% plan. So I'm hoping that from what you see tonight to even what you see next month will be better. As an aside, we've declared next week a week of writing. So we're all like trying to get out of all of our meetings, and we're just going to come and really work on this. So here is, kind of our outline for Kevin and I tonight, and it's organized into 5 parts. We'll start with the draft Regional Parks and Trails objectives. You've seen these before. Won't spend a lot of time there. Next, we'll share some learnings from a recent all-morning meeting we had with our park implementing agency partners to discuss the draft policies and actions. Heard a lot. Next, we'll move into the heart of the conversation, which is our draft policies and actions. Then we'll share a proposal to create a new Parks and Trails Planning Handbook, akin to what is the local planning handbook. We have a local planning assistance group. They do the 2040 plan, the comprehensive plans, and they have a local planning handbook. The Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook is really similar to that. Like, the idea is the details, the requirements are contained in that, not the policies and high-level actions. And then finally, we'll get into the discussion, your questions and advice. So if it works for the chair and the committee members, Kevin and I will take about 15 minutes right now to go through these slides. And if you could hold your questions until the discussion period, my expectation is you'll say, go back to slide 6 or go back to whatever, and we'll do that. Okay. Let's keep it moving, Emmett. Here we have the 5 Parks and Trails objectives, beautifully arranged by Kevin. And these are, you've seen them before, but foster equity and belonging, take care of what we have, protect and restore, adapt and mitigate, our climate objective, and then meeting future needs, or meet future needs. So that's the sort of top line about these. And now we're going to drop into the policies and actions, so the more specifics. But before I do that, I wanted to share 2 slides that are kind of our takeaways from the Regional Park Implementing Agency meeting and what we learned there. we organized it into 5 parts. This slide covers 3, the next one covers 2. But the system plan contains kind of what's in the system, what parks and trails exist today. In general, the agencies were very supportive of this. The agencies wanted to make sure we covered how the regional system nests into the broader Minnesota's outdoor recreation landscape. They wanted to definitely differentiate between what is regional, what's local, what's state. Additionally, the group expressed support for proposal to create a new natural resource like corridor classification, something like that, in addition to like regional park, park reserve, regional trail, and special recreation feature. We'd have a natural resource area. And I think that the group expressed support, but I also think that they're saying, well, maybe there could be public land and private land in this. So I'm just reading the tea leaves and saying, yeah, I think we're gonna move this idea forward, but as part of the work plan, because it's an idea that just needs a little bit more time, a little bit more discussion in terms of what it might be. So stay tuned on that. Climate and natural systems. Again, the agencies were like, yep, it's about time we're catching up and really integrating climate and natural systems ideas into the plan. There was a feeling that they weren't seeing the acquisition of recreation lands in that one, that they just wanted to see that as a clear priority, not only acquisition of high quality natural systems, but lands to provide access. That was a big takeaway. And then the next one was the agencies recommended that the recreation lands needs to come through more clearly as a policy, or in the policy. For the climate policy section, there was a desire to better understand what actions Met Council will have preliminary responsibility for. And this is an area of the plan which Kevin will be going through in just a minute, is I think that there's going to be a lot of growth between this version and the one you even see next month. But a lot of really good climate action work here. Need to clearly delineate the lead role. That was it. Recreation, activities, facilities, and programming. People want to determine activities and facilities eligibility through criteria, not a static list. Right now, there's a pretty static list that I think was developed in maybe 1974, and it's kind of gone forward into each policy plan. And the idea is that this could be really a set of criteria. And then the other concept is sort of a conceptual concept, but the idea of moving away from balancing people and nature as if you're always like talking about this dynamic tension that exists, and really focus on connecting people and nature, that should be the emphasis. This next slide identifies finance. The work, there is a finance work group, so council staff and regional park implementing agency staff are meeting, and they're in the middle of their efforts, so not yet ready for prime time, but still they've made a lot of progress. And they're less focused on the policy like rewrite and more focused on thinking about how do we strategically fund the regional parks and trails system. Like that's what, and some of this work will move forward through the policy plan effort, but then there's some of it will move through the council's legislative work or even their budgeting work. So like we're trying to tease apart what are the actual needs and who has lead. So, but there certainly was some that had to do with the policy plan. So just again, I'm gonna go into this in a few minutes, but a few big takeaways that I've had for this is agencies recognize that they can't have everything but if the council was successful in prioritizing an increase in regional funding, they would recommend directing a large portion of it to the operations and maintenance funding. And this is for the commissioners that have been with the council a while. there is a law in state law that says, the state will fund the operational costs of the regional parks and trail system at the 40% level, but then the small print says unless they decide to fund it at less, they've always decided to fund it at less. On average, historically, they funded it at 9% of the total operating costs. So that means the local, or the implementing agency, so the regional park implementing agency is paying 91%. So agencies are just saying, let's prioritize operations and maintenance funding. Currently, I just want to say that the council doesn't, we just passed state money through, so we don't participate in this one. A couple other takeaways around finances. Agencies mentioned that the equity grant program remains a big priority and to consider increasing support for it. And finally, there was a recommendation to consider increasing the council's match of state funds above the statutory requirement. So like our bonding program, there's currently a law that says the state will appropriate for every $3, the region will match it with $2. And so, the agencies were asking, can we go above that? For instance, like match it 1-to-1. Finally, the Parks Planning Handbook. Agencies were supportive of this idea. They wanted a visual diagram to explain the relationship between the parks policy, I think Tony might like this, the Parks Planning Handbook, and the administrative guide. So create a visual that just explains how each of those documents serves. So what it serves. So now I'm going to pass it to Kevin to walk through the draft Parks and Trails policies and actions. And I want to say up front that we recognize this is going to be a whole lot, maybe too much to go through. But please know that we want to introduce you to this proposal, so all the policies and actions, with the idea that we'll be back next month and the following months with to continue the conversations as we deepen our conversation about this. During the reports section, I talked to Tony last Friday and I said I would bring a proposal for how that will come back. So I will voice that proposal at today's meeting and then I'll send it out in email to you folks so you have it in a way you can remember it. But I will put that on the table this afternoon. So now I'll turn it over to Kevin. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you, Emmett. So as Emmett has mentioned, the next few slides we'll be going through all of the regional parks policy plans, proposed policies and actions. So this next section will be a little dense, and in the interest of time, I just wanted to let you know that I won't be reading all of the actions word by word, but you're more than welcome to kind of find these slides uploaded to your information item as figures 2 through 8. And I'll be sure to cover kind of key highlights and main themes that happen within each section of the policy plan. So to start off and orient you to the next few slides, the main title will kind of talk about the proposed section that this topic will be hosted within, and then it'll also kind of discuss which topic we're discussing. So in this one, we're discussing the system plan. The top bubble will be hosting the proposed policy language, and then underneath that are the proposed draft actions regarding to that policy. So starting off in the system plan, this section usually covers a lot of the regional park and trail systems unit definitions, but also how we discuss phasing and boundary adjustments and the different processes that it takes to maintain and update the parks and trails system. So in the existing regional parks policy plan, there actually aren't any current policies or actions, so all of this content on this slide is new, but quick disclaimer is that a lot of these actions that are being proposed are just the existing work that we do, but we just wanted to make sure that we elevated this to an action and policy level. So the policy for system plan reads, maintain a robust and current set of data, maps, plans, processes, applications to support regional parks and trails planning. And the associated actions kind of talk about a commitment to updating the maps and kind of going back to the existing regional park and trail unit definitions and kind of reassessing it to ensure that it stays up to date with trending information. In the next section, we have climate and natural systems. And for section 3, we are currently proposing breaking it down into 2 policies. So one focused on natural systems while another one is focused on climate. And in this current section, we have the natural systems policy, which reads, identify, protect, restore, and maintain lands with high quality natural features, access to water, and or restoration potential as part of the regional parks and trails system. And within this, we have 6 proposed actions. The first 3 are modified actions that are actually sourced from the existing policy plan. So as some of you might know, the existing section 3 is proposed to, the existing section 3 is actually currently the siting and acquisition policy. And we are proposing to kind of right-size it and reframe it so that the policy itself would be framed as the natural systems policy, while associated strategies in the existing plan would be moved into the action level and modified a little bit. So some of the draft actions in the natural systems section focuses specifically on land acquisition, prioritizing which lands we want to protect and acquire in the future. And then there's also some other actions that focus on convening the regional park implementing agencies to strategize ways to protect and maintain our natural systems within the regional parks and trail system. And then we also have some other actions that propose providing research and data to our implementing agencies to better inform their future actions and to coordinate efforts all around. And then continuing on the...
Question, you want us just to wait until you're all done before we ask questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair and Commissioner, that would, if that would work, we would greatly appreciate that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So the second part of climate and natural systems, we have our climate resilience policy, which reads, adapt and enhance the regional parks and trail system to promote resilience to climate change, including the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. So all of this content on this slide is actually mostly newly created to incorporate climate action within our parks policy plan. And we currently have 8 actions that are being proposed. And a lot of them kind of range in different topics, ranging from public awareness and kind of engaging the public and coordinating efforts to improve information and try to tell our story better as a regional parks and trail system and what our role is in the climate change conversation. And then we also have other actions that are proposed, such as research and data, so kind of seeing how what information we can provide on carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas emissions. And then we also have some proposed actions that discuss convening the regional park implementing agencies to discuss strategies on kind of better improving our operations efficiencies, but also seeing how we can strategize on improving climate action overall. Moving on to section 4, planning, we have an existing policy. So a lot of this content on the slide is, for the most part, substantially the same as the existing planning section. And this section focuses on long-range planning for different park and trail units and kind of how we create different plans and long-range plans for the regional parks and trail system. And the policy reads, promote long-range planning and help provide integrated resource planning across jurisdictions. So as I had mentioned before, a lot of the content will remain generally mostly the same. And as you can see on the right-hand side with the arrows, we are proposing to shift some of the content, some of the proposed actions into the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook or the Grant Administration Guide. Specifically for the first action that kind of talks about long-range planning requirements, I just wanted to add a quick disclaimer that only the long-range plan requirements themselves would be proposed to move into the handbook due to their procedural nature, but the policy will remain, is proposed to remain in the plan. Moving on into section 5, we have system protection, and this talks about the different actions that the regional park system can take to ensure the protection of our natural systems and our regional park and trail lands. It's kind of similar to section 4 in the sense that a lot of the content will be modified in a small sense, but a lot of the content is proposed to be moved into either the Grant Administration Guide or the Parks and Trails Planning Handbook. Moving on, we have section 6, which is recreation facilities and programming. The policy that is being proposed is foster a sense of belonging by providing a wide spectrum of leisure and play opportunities while balancing the needs of people, places, and the natural world. And within the draft actions, most of them have been modified substantially from the existing the existing actions, but the only one of them kind of remains mostly the same, which is the 4th one that talks about the Regional Bicycle Transportation Network. Other than that, the top 3 actions discuss commitments to improving access to the regional parks and trail system by reevaluating or reassessing what criteria we use to assess recreational activities, kind of emphasizing the importance of equity and inclusion and improving access to underserved communities, and then also just talking about improving partnerships and connections to areas outside of the regional parks and trail system. So looking at how we can kind of connect to different organizations to improve access and connection to the regional parks and all of our amazing amenities. And then I will pass it on to Emmett to discuss finance.
I will quickly be done. And I just wanted to express appreciation for letting us get through this, but also, Monica, one thing you said last month was we want some time to immerse ourselves in the draft, don't expect us to read. So like one of our ideas today is that we're just getting it all out there with the idea that we will be discussing these over the next several months. And it will get better, we hope, but the ideas will be, recognizable anyway. So I'm gonna just cover the final policy today around finance. As I said earlier, the work group, the council agency work group that's working on this is in the middle of their work, so not done, but stay tuned. They're both working on new policies and actions to fund the system, but also how to more strategically fund the system, so stuff even outside of the regional parks policy plan update. So, and I also wanted to say that there's a lot of actions here too, and that there are a number of underwriting actions that must precede many of the changes that we're even proposing in these draft actions. So stay tuned. Many of the draft finance policies, or the new draft policies, we simplified it, made it a little more straightforward. This is Jessica's magic, but just administer state and regional funding to the 10 regional park implementing agencies in support of the regional parks and trail system. It's just a lot more straightforward. The first action is around strengthening equitable use through the equity grant program, possibly increasing the council's funding for this program. The next one is around the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund. There were some ideas there to potentially increase the amount each agency may receive annually from the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund and the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. It's the lottery proceeds again. The third one is around, there's also a recommendation to explore increasing the council's match to state funds above the statutory requirement of $3 state to $2 region. So again, going to maybe a 1-to-1 match. The next action is around the council actively seeking support for the agencies as they seek other funding. The Parks Bonding Program is the next one. The council, the bonding formula only exists in the Regional Parks Policy Plan. So the idea that we need an action in there that speaks to this is how we distribute the bonding program, codifying how that mechanism works. And then the final one is about regional trail corridors. The idea that when transit is involved, like some of the Three Rivers regional trails are built on LRT land, and that if a trail is developed, the trail must exist at least 10 years to be eligible for funding. So that's the idea there. Okay, I'm gonna now go to the idea about a Parks and Trails Planning Handbook. This was the idea that, again, I spoke to earlier. We're proposing to establish this Parks and Trails Planning Handbook. It's new. It does not exist today. It's akin to the local planning assistance that helps local communities, cities, townships with comprehensive planning. So this would be to help. It would contain the procedural and contextual language that's in the current 2040 plan. This would focus on our parks and trails policy, so the policy plan would be more focused at a strategic level. We're proposing to move the more procedural contextual information out of the plan. Some examples are the long-range plan requirements that Kevin just mentioned, long-range plan amendment processes, criteria and definitions. There's also interest in including requirements for how the handbook will be updated. That's something our chair mentioned at the last meeting. And our goal is to bring the handbook to council committees prior to the approval of the 2050 Parks Policy Plan, also as our chair mentioned last month. The idea is we will get you this sooner than the actual policy. So stay tuned. That's the idea for the planning handbook. And now that was long, and we expect to go backwards in order to go forwards. Now we're up for questions and discussion. So we will just stop and ask for any thoughts, any reactions.
All right, commissioners. Cecily.
I always have questions. I only have 6. So I can tell you what slide my question is on.
Yep.
So on slide 0, what is this symbol?
Oh, God, that's a great question, Cecily.
I get the Imagine 2050, but this?
It is a brand of like, we have the 2040 plan. This is Imagine 2050, and all I know about this is it's sort of an identifying marker for the Imagine 2050 planning process. I thought of it as it's like a kaleidoscope. That was just my imagination. Like you bring it into focus. It's coming in. Maybe it's not there yet, Cecily, but it's coming.
Okay, well that
It's marketing. It doesn't have to be.
is interesting. So my next question is on page 5. The second draft action, I think a number of us keep saying, wouldn't it be nice if visitation data was collected in the winter months? We have the summer visitation counts, but is this where there can be a conversation about winter count as well? And I know this has come up a number of times, but
This is certainly the statement that guides those. I don't know to what degree the details of what we do goes into the policy document. I don't know what it says currently, frankly. In terms like, our policy document will say that we want to have data. Whether our policy document needs to say how we collect it or not is another matter. So we could potentially have a directive for that happening elsewhere from this document, even if we do want to do it too.
Next on page 7,
Do you want me to respond to that, or I don't need to?
If you have a response, great, otherwise it might be just revisit later.
It's something we need to revisit later. I was gonna say something that, like you said, it's not in the current plan.
I'll just keep bringing it up then.
Yeah, good.
Good.
And I wrote it down.
Great.
7?
Page 7, the second to last draft action, and I brought this up last time. I'm curious how many of the implementing agencies already have a climate action plan, which could be countywide or district-wide. And there wasn't an answer, so. I mean, it's a great idea to convene them, but if most of them already have a plan,
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, so that was actually something that we had heard in our implementing agency partner meeting last month, was that some agencies had already, their jurisdictions already have a climate action plan
okay.
or something along the lines that outline climate action, essentially. And we are working to kind of modify and change the action as we go. So this might look very different in May as compared to tonight, but I know some things that were mentioned was potentially looking at exploring just supporting the implementation of climate action plans, or either, coordinating things to see if things can work out on a region-wide level. Maybe we might get a better standing as a region rather than an implementing agency by themselves, but that was kind of the information. Is essentially implementing agencies have brought up that they've created climate action plans, and we are currently working on redrafting it.
Okay, thank you. And one reason I brought that up, and again, this may pertain to where I used to work in California, when you had a transportation plan that was countywide. In some cases, a city may have a plan, but for those who can't have a plan, the overarching plan could cover those cities. For example, I live in Washington County, and I know Woodbury is working on a climate action plan right now, as is Stillwater. But I live in Marine, and I think it'll be a very cold day before my city council ever comes up with a climate action plan. So if the counties could incorporate, some planning guidance for cities or townships that don't have one, that might be invaluable, or not.
Maybe it'll be a very hot day.
Yeah, it'll be a hot day, yeah, exactly. Slide 8. And I'll mention this in my comments later, but the second draft action, what might those multimodal accesses be? Because right now I think our trails and parks have equestrians and bikes and walkers or hikers. Enhanced multimodal access. Is that getting people to the parks and open spaces and trails, or within them?
Chair, Commissioners, all of these actions, as Kevin said earlier, are in the existing plan.
Oh.
What you say is exactly right. It's like the idea that we should have multiple ways of helping people get to the regional parks, regional trail system.
It's getting too.
So I think that there is a desire to to do better, to create a more coordinated system. I wanna say, one of the goals with the Thrive, or excuse me, not Thrive 2040, but Imagine 2050 is better integration of council resources. We, by the way, have a transit system, you know, that the Metropolitan Council oversees, and could we better coordinate how that system works with the regional parks and trails system? I know the answer is yes, we could do better, and I think there's a real interest in doing better, but that is yet to be seen, so.
Yeah, so it covers both transit and getting there by in some cases, getting
So
there by
it's just
horse.
getting you to the,
Yeah, 'cause historically, it's been very focused on the, yeah, you drive to in your personal car. And we've talked a lot, especially about the transit, we want to do something, so this just puts a policy statement in, actually recognizing, hey, they keep asking about transit.
well, I've heard of public transit, but it just doesn't exist in my county.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna drop my last question, thank you.
All right,
Thanks, Cecily.
anyone else? Yes, Bob?
I have one fewer questions than assessing, but I have 5. Or comments.
Go ahead.
On slide 2, in your first bullet on fostering equity and belonging, I would like to suggest this would be a wonderful place to include increasing awareness of our system for the expansion of equity. So I'm just saying, let's capture this as an important element of our overall plan.
Message received, Bob, we heard you earlier, but I think that's a good place for it, so thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, I think it fits into the connecting people, like how do you connect people? Part of that.
Number 2, under climate and natural systems, under highlighting action where Met Council has primary responsibility. Typically, we haven't really had much of a sense of central responsibility other than distributing money.
Yeah.
Is this the beginning of more of a system-wide activity? Is there, am I reading here a strategic change in our goal? This is my question.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, from what I can kind of recollect so far, I don't think this is changing anything that we do as the Regional Parks and Trails System, at least in a major role. I think it would kind of explore the other places where we do have some authority to work on convening agencies, and then also providing critical information and coordination efforts to the implementing agencies just to ease their workload a little bit at the system-wide level. I think a way that we've been kind of been thinking about it is that water resources, in their plan, they're kind of focusing on the 3 Ps, so partner, provide, and plan. We're not necessarily taking that approach, but that is something that is in a similar sense of what we're hoping to highlight in our actions by identifying places where we can partner with the implementing agencies to carry out work, or places where we might have more of a providing role in terms of data and research. And something that is going on in community development is that we're working on expanding our climate research muscle and trying to stretch that out a little bit more. And the hopes is that in the future we can work with the regional park implementing agencies to provide that information to better inform their future choices.
And I'm not suggesting that it's a bad idea, there are a couple places here that I was interested in. I mean, what comes to my mind is that we play a central role in the audit of usage of the park system. And that's one area where we take the responsibility of something going on system-wide. So I'm just curious whether or not there's a little increase in activity from an overall standpoint. Yes.
Chair and Commissioners. Bob, I think that's an astute question, and as Kevin said, we are trying to increase our climate support. We've hired 2 climate researchers over the last few months, and we would like to help play a more active role in supporting the regional park implementing agencies in their work to manage natural systems. And like that, Kevin and several of us were involved in convening some of the natural resource leaders in the regional park implementing agencies, and it was a really powerful moment because this was a group of people that while they come together from time to time through what's known as this Metro Conservation Network, this was just the regional park implementing agencies, and they have just a ton of stuff in common. And there was a real interest, I think, in working together as a team with the idea that they could learn a lot from one another. We brought one of our climate researchers to the table with that, and he was really excited about the potential of this group. So I think that there's something there. What it is, I think we have yet to sort of figure it out, but we're working on it.
Well, the next question also kind of goes in that direction, and that's with slide 6. The note I wrote myself is, are we going to audit, or do we audit, or do we have a function of audit to make this happen? Are we really looking at what's going on in the implementing agencies to figure out whether or not this is happening?
Do you actually mean slide 6 or do you mean section 6
Well, on my,
or something else?
no, I'm looking at slide 6, section 3, climate and natural resources
Okay.
systems. It's just a question whether or not strategically, this is a nice objective, okay?
Yeah.
But objectives sometimes with no function of measurement don't go very far. So my question is, who's got the responsibility to make that work? And are we proposing to put into the central organization of the Met Council some function to assess how this is going?
Chair and Commissioners, great question. This is, I would say, the newest, most front edge of any of the policies in the plan. And I think that we will need to really sit with this, and we will need to distill it, and we need advice on it. I think that this is one where when the park implementing agencies looked at this, they're like, who's gonna do all this? This is a lot of stuff, and I think that is something that we need to figure out. The idea that the council's power is really in our ability to bring people together. The idea of creating unfunded mandates is not a really popular or effective strategy. And we are interested in doing this in a collaborative way. We think that we can bring some research capacity to this, and that a lot of the natural systems work and climate work, it was really hard for those natural resource professionals to separate out those two, because they think about natural systems and climate policy is so intertwined. But they think that there's a lot of potential, I think, to do more in the natural resource area, or the natural system area. This is the foundation of our system. But what this looks like, again, will be determined as we move forward on it.
I think the role of convener is one that we can legitimately play, without stepping over the bounds of unfunded mandates. So I would just encourage us in a number of different areas to continue taking that leadership role in terms of a convener, and perhaps bringing points of view, but not necessarily muscle. And then well, I'm going to stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Monica.
I'm irresponsible, I don't know how many questions I have. Well, first of all, in the slide number 2, I just want to comment that I really like the graphic design and the little green parts because it's very easy to understand. Even if I'm not reading it, I get what you're trying to tell me. And that's what I trying to say. It has to be simple so people understand it. I also like that we're working in operation maintenance funding because that's a need that sometimes it gets overview. I get we don't have to deal with that, but I just want to mention that it's good on that one. So if you go to slide 6 again, which now I'm getting why we are all in this if it's so new. I would like that, and I don't know if it's there or not really, but I would like to have a definition of climate and maybe a definition of natural system. Because we understand here what we are talking about, but if I'm reading this to a teacher, climate has another definition. If I'm talking to my brother who works in preservation and kind of climate is different. Now, are we talking about climate? Are we talking about climate change? Are we talking, restoring the climate, saving the climate? And how would you change the climate if you just put it like that? It's something that, you can move the weather, right? We're gonna try to adapt to how the climate might change or not change. But that's what I would like to see, a definition of what it is, because otherwise, kind of like Bob said, if we're gonna try to measure it, how are we gonna measure whether it is snow or not next year? And how are we gonna make it snow or not again? That's one of the reasons that I would like to see. Climate is a trending word nowadays, and I think if we add a definition, people who read this in 2030 might be, oh, that's what was happening there, or something related to that. Say all that, I do support all of this, and I'm very happy that it's there because it is important to check it out, right? And in the slide 11, the last point where the trails corridor might be used for transportation, they have to be at least 10 years. Can we make it at least 20 years? Maybe. I think I can see how this might become a bigger problem if people start using them for transportation, and why will we pay for them if this is supposed to be recreation? I think we kind of talk about it in some of the trails that we had before, but I'm not against people using them for coming back and forth from work, but our work here is mainly recreational and having people connecting with nature. But so maybe transportation park can pay for their transport. I don't know. Just save us some money here. Yeah. And I like it. I will be happy to read the draft one day. I can keep giving nightmares, Emmett, of how long this is gonna be. I hope you have a little sister of the handbook there. Yeah. And I don't know if you're aware, but April is the camp of the National Novel Writing Month. So you have all April as a challenge to complete the draft.
That's encouraging, thank you.
I know. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? A few things, mostly comments more than questions. Start with slide 3. I'll just go through it in the same order as well. There's a statement of describe the role of the regional center within the larger outdoor recreation landscape. And I know previously you had mentioned pulling out some information about relationship with other partners into the handbook rather than the policy plan. And so it occurs to me that we might actually need statements in both places because of the different audiences that we discussed last month, of the policy plan being more kind of general public facing, and the handbook, if we go that route, being more implementing agency staff. So one might have to kind of explain what is our role in terms of how the public uses it, and the other might be more about the partnerships of the government agencies and how we interact with them procedurally, that kind of stuff. It just might need to kind of exist in both places in some form. for the part about moving away from balancing people and nature, I very much like that suggestion. That's a good idea. I also thought, the word intersection could go into some things there. That makes a lot of sense. Slide 4. Emmett and I talked about this a bit on the phone, but just for everybody else, one thing I think would be useful is, you remember way back in this process, we had some different scenario presentations for population growth or decline or staying steady, what that would mean for us. I would like to see something similar for overall funding, have somebody be able to tell us impact, both for us and also for like the legislature, the general public, of if funding stays the same way it's been, this is what the park system will look like in 40 years. If funding goes up by 10 or 20%, this is what it looks like. If it goes down by 10 or 20%, this is what it looks like. Essentially, what are the consequences or benefits of particular kinds of funding changes, and what can we expect? Like, if we just did nothing and kept up our funding right now, at the end of this plan's lifespan, would our park system be okay and we just wish it was better? Or is it going to decline in quality? What do we need to be aware of? And I don't know who's going to do that. That also might be an unfunded mandate, because a lot of that's going to go out to the implementing agencies. Like, you guys say you need this money, what happens if you don't get it, or what happens if you get more? Describing the real life impact will be something that would be nice to see sometime. Slide 5, about, there's, the mention of the 4-year update schedule. We might want to have some breakdown of what that looks like. Like, typically, we've had one of those updates focuses on like the system plan part, one of those updates focuses on policy, one of those updates focuses on something else. I don't know if that's like a set thing where staff is always in the same kind of rotation and we can communicate that to the public, or if it is a little more adapt to whatever's going on. But I was just thinking, if there is anything kind of set that we could tell a public reader, here's what we do and where you can see it, that might be interesting. As well as the relationship between that weird bit and the 10-year mandated updates, that's always confusing. Because there's a statutory thing saying we have to update this part every 10 years, this part every 4 years, and they overlap, and because 10 is not divisible by 4. Slide 6 is where I thought of it, although it also kind of goes into other things because we're kind of moving around where citing stuff goes. When you're talking about who does the work of different things, in terms of defining where parks should go and what they should include, and we were talking earlier about how our long-range plans figured out. We've always assumed that the implementing agencies understand best what exists in their jurisdiction, and they're the ones that actually do it. But if they're asking us questions about who's going to do this work, maybe there's some that actually want our help with some pieces, in terms of, like, maybe they don't have the staff expertise or the GIS resources or whatever to identify where are the high quality natural resources in our county, where should we think about putting a park, what should we think about drawing the boundaries for. And we don't have the authority to do those things, but is that something that they can ask us for help with? And are we equipped to provide that if they do? And similarly, there's a statement about identifying areas that are not well served. Well, in order to identify that, we're going to have to define what not well served means. Yeah. And the statement about, it just occurred to me, develop, restore, and maintain native habitat types, and there's all this other stuff about climate. We might need to consider calling out the possibility that some of them will be installing non-native species because of climate adaptation. I'm just thinking, we don't want to have a grant application come through at some point that says like, hey, we want to do this bunch of work and it includes a non-native species because the native ones don't grow anymore, and it's been like, whoa, that's not eligible for funding because our policy plan says only natives. I don't know how to word that, but something to be aware of. Slide 8, kind of. You're talking about the different, well, it came up on 8, but it, yeah. actually is in the handbook procedure bits, which is 12. For the different amendment processes for long-range plans, we've talked about breaking those up into 3 different levels. We've seen presentations on 2 of those so far. I'm just wondering, are we expecting to get the 3rd one figured out and all 3 of those kind of criteria and processes finalized within the timeframe of developing this?
Chair and Commissioners, I think we're gonna come with a proposal to define what a minor plan amendment is. I think that's what the one.
Yeah.
Because there's an administrative process, a minor plan amendments, which has lower expectations for the amount of stuff the agencies have to do, and then a full-blown plan amendment.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be important to have that
Bring
stuff
that soon.
fully fleshed out
Yeah.
before we finalize our parks policy plan updated, because if we published a new policy plan and left open the gaping hole there of, to do, that would get confusing real fast. Then on slide 11, I was wondering on the regional trail corridor thing on LRT stuff, if it ends up not being 10 years, do we have a way of clawing that money back? I mean, they tell us that it's going to be 10 years and we take their word for it, but what happens if it's not?
Well, it's not, yeah, I like that. Send it
Just
back.
a thought, doesn't need to be answered now. I don't think it's ever come up, but yeah.
Would we claw back the money?
Yeah.
The bit here about the bonding formula, 70% population, 30% non-local visits, those are the same numbers as today?
Yes.
Okay. For the overall policy, that one does kind of bug me a little bit. I'm trying to figure out how else I want to do it. But I want to recognize here that we're doing more than just operational administration. There is a oversight role to the council here as well, which is something that I've brought up with staff on several occasions because of other things that are irking me. So, there's this funding that comes from the legislature and for our new members' benefit. Frequently, there's a formula either in our perks policy plan or in statute that says this percentage of it from somehow calculating is going to go to this implementing agency, this percentage to this one. So we don't necessarily have control over what the numbers are, but we do still have a role to say any dollar you spend has to comply with the parks policy plan and our rules about what are eligible expenses and things like that. So there's a function that we do that is, we pretty much end up rubber stamping things of, yep, okay, I'll give them a grant for that, that's fine. But there should be the possibility that something could be rejected if it ever wasn't for some reason. And I want to call out that in this, that it's not just how staff do their grant administration, it's also that the council and MPOSC have an oversight role for that.
Chair, I wrote fiduciary responsibility, and I don't know if that's it, but I
Yeah,
think
something
that's
like that.
important, sure.
Yeah, just something to make sure it adequately covers that our role is more than just a, what's the word now? Fiscal agent, we're not just that.
Not just beyond fiscal aid, yeah.
For also slide 12 / the thing with the handbook, I'm wondering how we can make sure that we're adequately communicating to the public what the processes are for developing long-range plans or amending them, and make sure that they know how to get involved. This is something I've also talked about, maybe we should have a page on our website that just walks through this. But especially if all the details of those plans are being pulled off into another document, we want a nice big bold thing that says, if you care about this, go read this, or something, so that, because that's something that we've never done a good job of communicating. Like, if you are a member of the public that wants to be involved, here's how our weird arcane government processes work. That's never something government does well. No, I think that was it.
Can I ask a question about one of your comments?
Yeah, Cecily, which one?
I think it was on slide 6. You were making a comment that perhaps with climate change, there may be different native species.
Yeah.
So I have a 2-part question. Number 1, what is our reference? Because I understand that one of the zones already has changed in Minnesota based on the state classifications, and I don't know if that impacts the Twin City region or not. So that's the first part. And second, I'm one of the people who got one of those Lawn de Legumes grants from Bowser, and they are allowing some non-native plants.
Mhm.
I'm doing a bee lawn, and this is more information than you all want, but I can put clover in because pollinators like it. It's a non-native.
Yeah.
So the question is, something that helps an insect or a mammal or a bird or something that's not native, it may be appropriate in some of these natural systems. And if we have a rigid list of what can be used, I don't know what the source is, I'm going to say.
Yeah, like if we are doing something else, who makes those decisions? I don't know.
Chair and Commissioners, that's a great point. I wanted to make two kind of thoughts. Is one of our climate researchers, brand new, Peter Wilfart, he asked that same question.
Oh, okay.
And he thinks that we need to consider outside what is our reference point. Like I've heard the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources talk about the Marshner map that was one of he was like some guy who was a land surveyor from the East Coast, and he did the surveying somehow from there and through
In the
contracts.
last century.
Oh,
Yeah, last century, 1860s.
I know which one you mean. Yeah, okay.
And that's our reference point, and like I don't think in a climate change world that necessarily makes sense. The Minneapolis Forestry Department just planted a Kentucky coffee tree in my boulevard, so I'm like, that's interesting. So I think that's a good question, and I think it's one that's being actively discussed by.
Yeah, I'm envisioning the policy plan statement would just be a couple words that acknowledges the question exists.
Yeah.
Answering the question, I think, is something that would take place among staff, and we'd maybe talk about it, but it's not really a policy level item. It's David.
Just to have two, I guess, questions or comments. On slide 2, just building off of what Monica said in terms of the just the graphical look of these different objectives, which I do think is good. I'm wondering if there's just something in this as you go through these different sections that uses, just kind of transports what objectives are covered for these slides, like ties that back. Because some of these slides, it looks like, for instance, planning on slide 8, it looks like there could be, part of this is connecting, part of this is environmental, climate kind of stuff. There's just, I think it would just make the whole document tie back to what those 5 objectives are a little bit better.
Sure.
And then, this is probably just my own ignorance, but in looking at those 5, I'm just wondering, in terms of who's looking at this document, it's partly it's the public, but isn't it also the agencies that are involved? And I'm wondering if maybe there's some little mention or maybe it's a 6th one that's on here in terms, a 6th objective in terms of how we partner together, the 10 agencies in terms of accomplishing these goals. I mean, just maybe it's something simple, or maybe it's weaved into one of the other ones. I'm not sure, but it just seems like that might be something that was worthwhile to look at.
Thank you. That's good.
Collaboration.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? I think we've got you a fair bit today, actually. So, that's good. Do you have any questions for us still?
We'll be back next month with more. And we really did hear a lot today, and I think you picked up on a number of themes that, we really need to continue to reflect on and bring them into what this becomes. Like, we have work to do, we know. But thank you, that's very helpful.
All right, thank you. So that then will bring us into our reports to wrap up. The one thing I want to bring up is that we are going to have to reschedule the July meeting because it falls on the 4th of July, so we can't have the meeting that day. So I don't know if people know calendars already or if we want to do some sort of polling, but probably either the 11th or the 18th of July instead.
11th, if that works for people.
Does the 11th sound good enough to just say that now?
I'm out of town. That's okay.
Okay, missing one, still a quorum. Okay, so yeah, we'll go for the 11th instead of the 4th. That's all I have. Other commissioners? Yes, Cecily.
Of course. So Washington County's been really busy in a good way. They just had a third meeting of the Glacial Hills Regional Trail, and they have kind of a definite alignment forming, and then a what-if alignment if things can happen. And I've never seen that in one of the regional trail plans before. Like if the railroad decides to abandon, we can do the alignment over there?
Yep.
Yeah, we have had a couple of
Have
those.
we? Okay.
The distinction is that we will only fund one of those options. So if they end up later building the other one, they have to do it entirely with local funds.
Okay. And then the other thing, and I'm kind of curious whether our, the other of the 10 implementing agencies already have a plan for e-bikes. Because at the second meeting in April, there's going to be, well, it's already gone to the commission, staff have already worked on it, and now it's going to the Board of Commissioners about cannabis, well, who cares, but also about e-bikes on regional trails and on unpaved trails, anywhere a bike can go. And I have had numerous conversations with Alex already about this, and I'm gonna speak against it at the meeting. I'm frightened, the thought of e-bikes on unpaved trails.
It would be nice if they could be somehow consistent across our implementing agencies, although we don't have any power to accomplish that because it's an ordinance thing in the elected boards. But yeah, that's gonna be a confusion point for users going forward. I know that there are some things in state law that say like, if it meets these criteria, then it gets considered the same way as a non-powered bike. Above these, then it's different.
Well, it's 1,000, whatever the measurement is,
Yeah.
it's a smaller motor, but I mean, who knows by looking at an e-bike which motor it has?
But that might be an interesting thing to kind of poll the IAs about and see which ones do you have rules about these so far, and are they remotely the same? Can we make them the same?
Yeah, because it's covering segways, electric scooters, electric bikes.
Yeah, like if we have a piece of pavement that crosses the boundary between the implementing agencies and it's just transparent to the user, is it possible that in this foot it's allowed and in the next foot it's not?
Most likely.
So, yeah.
Well, the problem there is who's gonna reinforce that rule.
Yeah. Okay. It's an interesting
I'm
point.
with you, Susie.
So
Those
signage
are
enforcement.
very fast bikers, so.
Yeah, they can only go 25 miles an hour, that'll be fun. See how many
Yeah.
accidents there are. It's people.
Any other commissioner reports? Okay.
No, but I have a question. I don't know if Emmett is gonna cover. How is the legislature going with the, okay.
And with that, staff report.
If it's okay with the chair and commissioners, I would like to call Jonathan Flaming to the table because it is Christmas in April. Jonathan.
Wow.
He has goodies for us.
Oh,
My old administrative assistant, I shouldn't say old, but my former administrative assistant, who is now retired, several years ago dreamt up the idea of creating a Parks and Trail fact book so that I would be able to have facts at my fingertips. And I'm old school. I like actual physical things sometimes.
Yes.
And so she is now enjoying retirement, and it got handed off to somebody else who likes shiny paper. And I thought these are so nice, I just gotta hand them out to everybody. The Parks and Trail Fact Book has all the information you probably ever wanna know. These are for you and your staff, sir.
Thank you.
All the information you ever wanna know about all of our parks, all of our trails, our partnership parks. Winter maps, summer maps, factoids at the system level as well as the parks. And we try to publish this every year. I think we've done it for about 6-7 years now. And a copy for you folks to use as you like.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. Jonathan, I just want to report to your staff person that this is next level. Like,
I know,
This
it
is-
blew my mind.
yeah, nice job.
Very nice. Is it okay to jump in?
Okay, so I have a few reports, really just two. The first one is around the legislature, and this is late breaking news, but this afternoon the Senate passed, I'm just gonna call it Jessica's Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund bill, because we have a piece in it. We have $2.5 million marching through. 2.5 million? Oh, it's 3, excuse me. 3 million, which we will match, of course, this afternoon, and it's identical to the House version that was passed, so it will go directly to the governor's office, and that's great, because I think we just finished off our oldest appropriation, so the timing is perfect. I wanted to mention that the bonding bill continues to move forward, but that's often the last thing, as they say at the legislature, to drop. I think Amanda could talk to that. But it continues to be one of the items that gets worked out. The governor has requested $2.5 million for the regional park system. And the agencies have a $15 million bill. And we'll see what happens. The council has a policy of matching those $3 state to $2 regional. The governor did release a supplemental budget proposal that was about $200 million, which is pretty modest, but it's still, significant. I think that there's a real hesitation to go for a really big supplemental budget bill because of concerns about a structural deficit that I don't know much more about that. But so the legislature, we're really coming up to the last month of it. So it's moving quickly and stay tuned. May we'll know a little bit more, but probably June will be the day when we really can report what happened. Now I'm going to give you a short proposal for how we're going to cover that tremendous amount of information we just put out, and I will put this out into an email to all of you so you don't have to take notes. But the idea is we really did recognize that we covered a lot of information today. Thank you for your patience, and also thank you, you folks tracked it really well. But we'll be back in May with what we're calling a 60% plan. So it'll be really good. It will need to get better. But we're going to put a little focus on what we're calling the front section or the front matter of the plan, which has some of the demographic information, the existing conditions. So we hope to cover some of that. We want to put an emphasis on the finance chapter. We know that's something that people care a lot about. And the recreation activities and facilities chapter. So we'll be here in May with a little bit more emphasis on those areas. In June, we'll be back with climate adaptation and mitigation, that new one that has a lot. We needed a little more time to continue to work those ideas forward, and natural systems. Finally, we'll really focus in on the Parks Planning Handbook too in June. In July, we will talk in greater detail about the system plan, long-range planning, and system protection. So that's the proposal. And then in August, we have what we're calling the 90% plan. This is really bureaucratic, so I'm sorry, but the 60% plan like, we still have the ability to like hold it as an individual plan, parks kind of separate from the rest of the council's regional development guide. That'll be easier because like we're trying to figure out how to make our current plan, you know, speak with one voice across our chapters. When we get to August, we're supposed to come with a 90% plan, and that's gonna be packaged with the other chapters of the regional development guide, which include land use, housing, transportation, water resources, and a bunch of other demographic and existing condition stuff, and probably things I missed, but so stay tuned. My hope is that we're just slowly immersing ourselves in this, and as we move through the summer, we'll get deeper into it, we'll get more knowledgeable with it, but you'll also see a marked improvement in what we bring to you. So, and I shouldn't say improvement, I should say just that's how the process works. Like, so that is those are my reports, and I will email what I just covered to you soon.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we're ready to adjourn. Thank you.
Thank